"Well, Logan, are you coming home for the family branding or not?" My mom asked me over the phone. My family's cattle branding is a town-wide event. It's something that comes with the promise to work hard in the heat for hours on end, but close out the day with a homemade meal. Was I to go home for my first branding since being away at college, or stay back and focus on my studies? Decisions, decisions, decisions. Growing up on a ranch always meant there were a lot of decisions to make. Black Angus cattle or red Angus cattle? Grass-fed or grain-fed? Hope for rain to grow the pasture or buy more feed? Ranching requires decisions and choices, some of which are more important than others. Carry on the tradition of ranching when Grandpa decides to retire, or sell the herd? Hope for better prices next year, or pick up and sell everything now? Every single day, ranchers are faced with decisions and choices, but so is everybody else. I'm sure we've each made some decisions today. What did you have for breakfast? Did you have coffee or tea? Did you wear this shirt or that shirt? Just like business decisions that ranchers make, some of the decisions that we make every single day are more important than others. For example, who we decide to listen to. With the hot topic of sustainability in agriculture taking over the media and political stages frequently, we have some new decisions to make. Do we choose to listen to hardworking agriculturalists who have been involved in the industry for years, or those who are generations removed from it? My name is Logan Mason, and I'm a third-generation cattle rancher and undergraduate student studying animal science. My family has been ranching mixed Angus cattle in southeastern Colorado for as long as I can remember, meaning that I got a first-hand glimpse into the story that agriculture has to tell. Many people think that agriculture is to blame when it comes to sustainability concerns. And if you're anything like me when I first started diving into studying this subject, you may be asking, why? According to the Ohio Farm Bureau, the average American is 3 generations removed from the farm. When people are this distance from production agriculture, it's easy to point the finger at something they're unfamiliar with. But the overall answer of why we blame agriculture for sustainability is not as simple as we would hope. Let's start with the definition of sustainability. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines sustainable, in this context, as the means of harvesting or using a resource in such a way that the resource is not permanently damaged or depleted. When the resource we're talking about is land and water used for food production, sustainability is no longer a choice. Agriculture is the root of our lives. Everything we eat, drink, wear, and use comes from some facet of production ag. In order to continue producing products essential to everyday life, we have to do so in such a way that allows us to continue doing this for years to come. Contrary to popular belief, on many operations, this is already occurring. When you hear the word sustainable, some other words probably come to mind. Words such as climate change or global warming. Concerns surrounding the sustainability of the ag industry often have to do with overtilling the land, greenhouse gas emissions, and more. When I first started doing research on sustainability in agriculture, it was for a speech contest through a high school organization. As I sat down to write this speech, I realized I don't have any other perspective than my own. I knew how my family treated our cattle. I knew how important it was for us to use our resources wisely or to take care of pasture land. But other people didn't know that. I had a different perspective than many of those around me. When I realized just how different this perspective was, I was headed to a conference with other high schoolers up in Denver, Colorado. At this conference, we were tasked with completing an icebreaker. It's one of those things we all dread because we want to come up with the best story for a fun fact about ourselves or one of our cool experiences. I decided that I was going to talk about my family's ranch and some of my favorite cows. As I started diving deep into this story about my family's livelihood, about what we do every single day, I noticed some of the looks on my newfound friends' faces. They looked at me like I was speaking a different language. They looked at me like they had no idea what I was talking about. This gave me a realization that I have a different perspective than many of those around me. Not every kid grew up naming baby calves like pets or giving vaccines on branding day. Not every kid grew up leading around a 1,200-pound steer at the county fair as if it were a puppy. I have a different perspective than many of those around me, and the same concept applies to my views on how agriculture is working to help our planet. This industry cares about sustainability, but many people don't know how we take action to show that. Sustainable farming is something that has been going on for centuries, and farmers and ranchers all over the world are frequently implementing new measures in order to be sustainable. I can't possibly tell you about every single sustainable measure being taken in ag with our time here today, but we're going to go over just a few. One of the most innovative and sustainable methods in ag being used today is regenerative farming. Regenerative farming works to restore the land that we're using to grow our crops. It helps enrich the soil rather than depleting it. Many of the farming techniques that we've been using for decades subsequently have some negative effects when it comes to soil health, but regenerative farming does the opposite. This method is based on the 5 principles of regenerative agriculture, which are to keep the soil surface covered, to keep roots growing below the soil, to limit physical and chemical disturbance of the soil, increase biodiversity, and to help integrate grazing livestock into our agricultural systems. Farmers all over the world are making a choice to prioritize soil health, and one of the ways they're doing this is through integrated pest management systems. These integrated pest management systems allow farmers to limit the physical and chemical disturbance of the soil by using natural methods rather than chemical pesticides. Farmers are still controlling pests, but they're avoiding the easy road that is chemical pesticides and making the choice to prioritize soil health. A second example of regenerative farming is the use of cover crops. Cover crops are crops planted with the intention of keeping the soil surface covered to decrease wind erosion damage. Think about the dry and windy Texas Panhandle. Cover crops are the only reason we can still farm there. Common examples of these cover crops include annual ryegrass, cereal rye, and the Austrian winter pea. These crops aren't planted with the intention of making a profit, but it shows these farmers making a choice to prioritize keeping our soil healthy. Outside of these 2 examples in farming, ranchers are also making sure that they graze their cattle on rotational pastures to prevent soil damage, and farmers and ranchers alike have countless methods of being sustainable while they produce food for our world. You can clearly see that agriculture has a bigger story to tell than we may realize. These agriculturalists don't hate sustainability. They don't think it's an inconvenience or don't see it as something they're avoiding. In fact, farmers and ranchers rely on sustainability. If agricultural production is not sustainable, it's not profitable. This then hinders the chance that these farmers have to pass their cropland down to their children and grandchildren. Farmers want to make a profit, so they choose to be sustainable. They want to continue farming, so they choose to be sustainable. This is a choice they're making for themselves and for others. They're feeding our world. If you're sitting here wondering why this matters to you, it's because less than 2% of the US population is comprised of farming and ranching families. I want you to think back to some of those choices you made today. What did you have for breakfast? Did you have coffee or tea? Did you wear this shirt or that shirt? You may not realize it, but each and every one of those options you had to choose from came from some facet of production agriculture. The food on our tables, the clothes that we wear, the ethanol in the gasoline to run our cars, it's all coming from production agriculture. We cannot continue to blame the industry that keeps our world running and functioning. We cannot continue to bite the hand that feeds us. These agriculturalists care, and this is agriculture's true story. Families, normal people, doing their best at feeding our world. These agriculturalists, however, can't be the only ones telling their story. Consumers see what's presented to them, marketing materials at grocery stores. Agriculturalists see the behind the scenes. Agriculture needs consumers to be educated on general issues relating to the industry. Agriculture needs people in our corners. So how do you begin to stand up for agriculture? One way is by purchasing from local farms and ranches. Visit a farmer's market instead of a large chain grocery store. Buy your beef from local ranches or from sales at county fairs. Doing this helps you directly support an individual's livelihood and gives you a way to choose to hear their story. Doing this can also help you do a small part in making an impact on supporting ag's mission towards sustainability. You can help decrease the amount of carbon emissions caused by transporting these ag products around the world. According to the Congressional Budget Office, around 38% of total CO2 emissions come from transportation. You can make this one small step in helping support sustainability in ag, while also hearing a rancher's or farmer's perspective. Making connections with these production agriculturalists, it allows you to humanize the ag industry and to learn their stories. Then, tell your friends their stories. Tell your families their stories. Choose to hear the stories of those growing your food and their stories of efforts in sustainability and their efforts in bettering our world. Much of agriculture is a foreign concept to the general public. It's a field not many are in, so it makes sense that most of us don't know the stories behind the industry. Agriculture cares. We don't have to choose between productive agriculture and sustainability. These producers are taking steps towards being sustainable that can help them effectively feed the world while saving it. Choose to hear their stories. Choose to ask and to listen. Choose to gain perspective. We each make small decisions every day that can have a big impact. My family chooses to use our water and resources wisely and to consider our pasture when planning for the future. We choose to consider how our actions will affect those after us. Our story is one I aim to continue telling for as long as people continue to listen. I chose to go back home for that family branding. I chose to do this one small thing to continue on the tradition of production ag in my family, and I aim to keep doing so for years to come. Today, I hope you choose to reach out to a local producer and listen. I hope you choose to educate yourself, and I hope you choose to support the sustainable industry that feeds our world. Thank you.